At 10 p.m., what they saw on the news made them freeze, and by then, it was already too late to change what they had said. My phone was still in my hand, the glow of their messages burning into my eyes. My sister's reply sat there, cold and casual. "I'm busy. You deal with it." Beneath it, my mother's words felt sharper, heavier. "He survived. Stop making him our responsibility." I looked through the glass at my son, lying in the hospital bed, pale, motionless. Stitched together by a surgery he almost didn't survive. Machines hummed softly around him, each beep a reminder of how close I came to losing everything. "He wants to see you." I had written, just that. No drama, no accusations. Their silence afterward said more than their words ever could. Typed back, "It's okay." And in that moment, I made a decision they would never see coming. I've always been the one they call when something goes wrong, and the one they forget when things are fine. My sister Hira had a way of filling every room with her voice. Her needs, her importance. My mother revolved around her like everything else was background noise. I learned early not to compete. It was easier to stay quiet, to handle things on my own, to become useful instead of visible. When my son was born, nothing really changed. They visited once, brought a small gift, took photos, and left before he even finished his bottle. After that, he became a name they asked about out of habit, not care. I stopped expecting help long before the surgery. Even then, I didn't ask for much. Just a visit, a presence, a reminder that he mattered to someone beyond me. But sitting in that hospital room, watching his chest rise in fragile, measured breaths, I realized something I had avoided for years. I wasn't just overlooked. We were, and every quiet compromise I had made, every moment I chose peace over confrontation, had taught them the same lesson, that we could be set aside without consequence. Tonight, for the first time, I understood the cost of that silence. It didn't start in that hospital room. It never does. It was in the small things, the kind that slip past if you're not paying attention. A week before the surgery, I called my mother to tell her the date. There was a pause on the line, just long enough for me to hear her shift the phone from one ear to the other. In the background, the television played something loud and cheerful. She said, finally distracted. "Send me the details." I did. She never opened the message. My sister replied hours later with a thumbs-up emoji. No words, no questions. The night before the operation, I sent another message. "He's scared. He keeps asking who will be there when he wakes up." This time my mother responded, "Don't put that in his head. Kids forget these things." I stared at the screen, reading it twice, as if the meaning might soften. At the hospital, when I filled out the emergency contact form, I hesitated for a moment, penny hovering above the paper before writing only my own name. No one called to ask how it went. No one asked if he made it through. And somewhere between those silences, something inside me shifted, quietly but completely. The decision didn't arrive with anger. It came quietly, almost gently, the way clarity does when there's nothing left to misunderstand. It was just after the surgery. The doctor had already spoken. Calm voice, careful words. He made it through. Relief should have followed, but it felt distant, like something meant for someone else. I stood beside my son instead, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest, the steady rhythm of machines doing their part to keep him here. His fingers moved slightly against the sheet, searching. I leaned closer. "I'm here," I said. His eyes fluttered open for a second, clouded, unfocused, but I saw the question in them anyway. "Is anyone else coming?" I didn't answer it. I couldn't. Instead, I reached for my phone and reread their messages, letting each word settle without resistance, without excuse. For years I had explained them away, busy schedules, different priorities, misunderstandings. But there, in that room, with everything stripped down to what actually mattered, their absence stopped being complicated. It became simple. They had chosen distance, repeatedly, deliberately, and I had allowed it. I placed the phone back in my pocket, adjusted the blanket over my son's shoulder, and made a decision that felt less like revenge and more like correction. From this point forward, I would stop asking, and I would start answering. I didn't rush into anything. I never do. The first step was distance, not dramatic, not announced. I stopped updating them. No more photos, no more messages, no more quiet reminders that we existed. I let the silence settle, the same way they had. Then I reviewed everything I had overlooked before. My mother's name sat on a secondary contact for my son's medical file. I removed it. School records, emergency forms, access permissions, each one adjusted, carefully, legally. It wasn't anger driving me, it was accuracy. I spoke to a lawyer a week later, under the pretense of future planning. Guardianship, consent, medical authority. Every document was clarified, documented and sealed. No ambiguity left behind. At work, I finalized a decision. I had been postponing for months. A transfer. I had quietly qualified for. A better position. A different city. Enough distance to make absence permanent. I didn't tell them. There was no need. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to what they did or didn't do. I was building something independent of them. Structured, deliberate and complete. And when everything was in place, I simply waited. Not for them. For the moment they would finally notice. It happened exactly the way I expected. Quiet at first, then all at once. The news segment aired at 10 p.m., a short feature about post-surgery recovery programs for children. I hadn't planned to be part of it at first. But when the hospital asked if I would share our experience, I agreed. Not for attention, for accuracy. They filmed us in the recovery ward, soft lighting, muted colors, my son sitting up for the first time, fragile but smiling. I stayed just within the frame, answering simple questions, keeping my voice steady. "Who supported you through this?" the reporter asked. I didn't hesitate. "No one," I said calmly. It was just us. No names, no blame. Just the truth, stripped of everything unnecessary. The segment was brief, but it reached exactly where it needed to. My phone lit up minutes after it aired. First my sister, then my mother. Missed calls stacked one after another. Messages appearing faster than I could read them. "Why didn't you tell us it was this serious?" "We didn't know. You made it look like we didn't care." I watched the screen for a moment, then turned it face down beside me. In the quiet room, my son shifted closer, his hand finding mine. That was the only response that mattered. By morning, the silence I had lived with for years had shifted. No longer absence, but pressure. My sister called again, this time leaving a voicemail. Her voice sounded unfamiliar, stripped of its usual certainty. "You didn't have to say it like that," she said carefully. "People are asking questions." My mother didn't call. She sent messages instead, longer than usual, each one circling the same point without touching it directly. "You should have told us everything. We would have come if we knew. You made it public." I read them once, then set the phone aside. At work, a colleague mentioned the segment in passing. "That must have been hard," he said. Not prying, just acknowledging. It struck me then how easily a stranger could recognize what my own family had dismissed. The shift wasn't loud, but it was undeniable. They weren't reaching out because they suddenly understood. They were reacting to being seen. Reputation had finally done what concern never could, and that realization settled heavily. Not as satisfaction, but as clarity. This wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about understanding what had always been true. People don't change when they hurt you quietly. They change when others start to notice. And by then the question isn't whether they care. It's whether it still matters. In the days that followed, I didn't block them. I didn't confront them either. I simply let things remain exactly as they were. Except this time, I stopped carrying the weight of their absence. My son recovered slowly, each day bringing small, quiet victories. The first time he sat up without help. The first time he laughed again, soft, uncertain, but real. Those moments filled the space that used to be occupied by expectation. I accepted the transfer. A new city, a smaller place, closer to the hospital that had saved his life. Everything I needed was there. Everything that mattered. They kept calling for a while. The messages shifted in tone, less defensive, more careful, but they all circled the same unspoken request. To return to how things were. I never answered that request, because I finally understood something. I hadn't before. Peace isn't something you negotiate with people who only show up when it's convenient. It's something you build where they no longer have access. One evening, as the sun settled quietly beyond our new window, my son leaned against me. Steady and warm, no machines, no fear. "Are they coming to visit?" he asked. I paused, then shook my head gently. "No." He nodded, accepting it more easily than I ever had. And in that quiet acceptance, I realized we didn't lose them. We outgrew them.